Hey folks, George here. So the last couple of videos on this series regarding ethical and moral questions around animals and the environment, we focused on animals, yes? In these next two videos then, we're going to really focus on the environment and how we ought to ethically and morally consider the environment and what sort of issues are raised by these sorts of questions. The first article that we're going to read is by Paul W. Taylor, entitled The Ethics of Respect for Nature. Paul Taylor's central thesis is that a fundamental respect for nature is the foundation for environmental ethics. That is, individual organisms have inherent moral worth. Of course, this is contrasted with a more Kantian sort of notion that humans are the center of moral consideration. Recall that Kant suggested that it's our rational capabilities, right, that put us in this kingdom of ends, such that human persons really, rational persons, are the only things that ought to be respected as ends in themselves, inherently. Paul Taylor is flipping the story on Kant here by saying, no. All individual organisms have inherent moral worth. Taylor's life-centered environmental ethics says that we have moral obligations to all life as members of Earth's biotic community. This is because of their inherent worth. Their life is valuable as an end in itself. Every organism, species, population, organic community has a good of its own. And this good can be benefited or harmed. What is good for some entity is that which does it good. Its good is the full development of its biological powers. That brings it to us, humans, or rational beings, yes? We, moral beings, can act in a being's best interest without the being knowing or understanding what its own best interests are. You'll forgive me, and I think Taylor would agree with me, that trees do not know or understand what their best interests are. We do, though. And as such, we can act in a tree's best interests. How do we act in a tree's best interests? By knowing what is good for the full development of its biological powers. By the way, let me step back for a second. This is George talking now. Isn't this how we treat babies? Right? We treat babies this way. Babies don't know what's good for them, but we act morally when we work in a baby's best interests. So let's go back to Taylor. Here's an interesting question that he has to address. What does it mean to say that something has inherent moral worth? He answers this way. First, we must treat it with the principle of moral consideration. And second, we must treat it with the principle of intrinsic value. Thus, it must never be treated as a mere object, right? It can't be treated as though it is only instrumentally good to humans, let's say. It is valuable in and of itself. That's what inherent moral worth means. Here's what's interesting, of course. This sounds a lot, in fact, like Kant's philosophy, except where Kant restricts his philosophy to only those things that are rational persons. Taylor is extending this notion of intrinsic and inherent moral worth to all living things, not merely rational beings, like Kant would have it. Now, to be sure, Taylor is an honest philosopher who has intellectual humility. He knows that this ethical perspective cannot be proven. Here's what I think, though. What ethical system can be proven? What does it even mean to prove an ethical system? Well, okay, that's a complicated philosophical question, right? And Taylor doesn't want any of that. What he does want to focus upon in this particular philosophical article is, please hear me out and listen to what I have to say and consider this different perspective for a second, because after all, everything needs to start from somewhere, right? In at least my philosophical understanding, we all need some basis for understanding. That probably can't be proven anyways. So that Taylor acknowledges that his ethical system can't be proven, I don't think is the worst aspect of his philosophy by any means. Because, like I said one more time, I'm not sure that any of these ethical systems can be proven. They all have to start on some assumption, I think. All that said, however, this system is unified, coherent, and rational. So, what is this interesting new perspective that Taylor proposes? What is this biocentric outlook on nature? Number one, humans are members of the Earth's community. Number two, the whole ecosystem is a complex web of interconnected elements. Number three, each organism is a teleological, that is purpose-driven, center of life. Number four, that humans are superior over the rest of Earth's biotic community rests on an irrational basis that, again, can't be proven. Let's examine each of those in turn. Start with number one, that humans are members of Earth's community. We humans are but one species among many who are all part of this same evolutionary journey. Originally, the emergence of humans was nothing special. It was just one more species. Humans, however, do depend on ecological soundness, just like every other organism, by the way. But humans have perpetrated so many ecological disasters. Let's look at his second point. Taylor suggests that the natural world is an organic system. What does that mean? The ecological equilibrium is a self-replicating, energy recycling system that shall not be destroyed. Our human knowledge of all of these causal systems and their relations to each other is a reason to adopt this attitude of respect. Let's look at his third point, that each individual organism is a teleological center of life. Conceiving such things as centers of life means that we can look at the world from its own perspective. Each organism strives to preserve itself and realize its own good in its own unique way. This is regardless of consciousness or knowledge or any rational thinking at all. From this standpoint, we humans can make judgments about what promotes or protects the good of each organism. Now let's look at Taylor's fourth point. He denies any notion of human superiority. While humans do have certain capabilities that other organisms don't have, guess what? That is no reason that that fact suggests any notion of superiority. After all, guess what? All other organisms have capabilities that we don't have. Why doesn't that make them superior? There is no reason that standards of superiority should be given from the human standpoint. Yes, I have rational thinking, so do you. But plants have photosynthesis. Why don't we regard plants as superior in light of that capability that we don't have? It is unreasonable to judge non-humans from a human point of view. Rather, we should judge them from their own perspective of what helps them fulfill their life. Taylor says that it's a logical flaw to suggest that since animals lack some capacities, morals are therefore inapplicable to them. What does it even mean to say that one species is superior over another? After all, we've all rejected the notion that different kinds of people have different worth. So why shouldn't we also reject the notion that different kinds of species have inherent worth? Now, Taylor considers three more traditional philosophical perspectives that try to illustrate some sort of human superiority. Let's look at those. First, he considers the Greek tradition, such that humans are superior. Why? Because they're rational. But again, this begs the question. There's no reason to suppose that rationality is superior. Let's next consider the Cartesian tradition, which calls humans superior because they have souls. But again, this begs the question. There's no reason to suppose that because we have souls, therefore we are superior. How do you make that jump? Finally, he considers the Judeo-Christian position that supposes that humans are superior. Why? Because the Creator said so. The problem with this, of course, is that this only appeals to people who believe in God. And, not everybody believes in that kind of God. Thus, let's repeat the central thesis here. We must all recognize that all organisms are striving for their own notion of good, just as humans are. And thus, we ought to reject this notion of human superiority. And when we do reject the notion of human superiority, it entails the doctrine of species impartiality. All of this analysis that we've just explored suggests that that position, the doctrine of species impartiality, is much more clear-minded, unbiased, and factually enlightened. But all this said, Taylor admits that none of this entails anything about non-human rights. Let's recall that rights are a complicated discussion to talk about, right? Of course, we can still pass in our community some legal rights, such as laws around America that say it's illegal to abuse dogs. But there is still a problem of competing claims. That is a really hard problem, Taylor acknowledges, and it's beyond the scope of this paper. But at least with this doctrine of species impartiality, we have established that nice baseline from which we can start having reasonable, enlightened discussions about all of these things. See you next time. Bye-bye.